Alright, so let's address the normal baking errors that we introduced in the previous tutorial. So for starters, a really easy way that we can mitigate some of the errors is just by reducing some of the parts that we have our sharps marked. So we have sharps marked back here at the back plate, and we know that we've got these normal baking errors here, and we can see that especially when we look in the shading tab, right? So what we can do really easily is, and I'll just try to visually illustrate this for you. So I'm just going to put the split normal tangents on. And so if we just look in here, notice how we can't see a purple normal pointing out from here, where we can on the other edges. What's happening is that because we've marked it as sharp, it's split where the edges are going. So they're sort of like internally intersecting with one another, which is why we're getting that normal baking error. So what we're going to do is I'm just going to select these edges on the inside here. So I'm just going to go Shift H just so you can see it. So I'm just in this bridge here. I'm going to go Control E. Actually, I'll do this facing on the outside so we can see the effect. It's going to have Control E and clear sharp. And notice how we can see the tangent pointing back into the mesh now. So that's going to significantly help when we try to do our normal bake. And we can do something very, very similar for the inside here. So we're also getting a significant error of baking on the inner part of the ears here, and we're not going to be able to fully correct it, but we can do the best we can to try to mitigate it. As I've said, it's just because of the way I taught you how to model this. If I were to do it now, I would have done this a little bit differently so that we didn't run into this issue. But anyway, this is where we're at. So let's just go through, and I'm just going to select that inner edge, so just like this pretty much, and I'll just do the same on the other side. Where is it? This one here, and just select up and around. And so then if I go ahead, Control E, and we clear our sharp, notice how they're pointing back in to the mesh now. So that's going to help with our next normal bake. The other thing we need to do, and this is kind of just a lack of planning on my behalf and not really seeing things through the way I probably should have, but we are going to need to explode the mesh, which I definitely should have done before we did the sculpting, because this is going to be a little bit painful, but we are going to need to move the high poly mesh. Now, if your computer simply can't handle this, don't fret, just put a comment down below, just let me know, and what I'll do is I'll actually supply you with a blend file of the exploded high poly mesh. Yes, sorry, I know that won't let you use your exact sculpting. This is just an error on my behalf, so I'm going to try to help you all to fix it. So just let me know if your computer can't handle it, and I'll supply you with my blend file. But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to select the high poly mesh here. I'm just going to tab into edit mode. And doing this with high poly meshes is a pain, just because edit mode and high poly meshes don't really like each other. But I'm just going to L select the helmet, so it might take a second here, and I'm just going to make sure the select lint is set to normal, and I'm just going to go G, X, and 5 just to move it away from these other elements. And 5 is completely arbitrary as well. It's just to move it away from everything else. So do that, and then I'll need to do the same on the low poly here. So L to select this, G, X, and 5. And so that will just make sure everything is properly lined up. Now, I just screwed up this entire tutorial. I just actually finished recording it and have to come back and redo the whole thing because I taught an error that I didn't pick up on, and it carried through the entire series. So what I implore you to do right now to not face the same sort of problems I have, because I've just spent hours recovering all this, duplicate everything for the low poly as of right now, and let's make a brand new collection. We'll call this duplicates, okay? Create that, and just leave that there, just in case, right? So the only thing I couldn't recover in what I'd lost was the skull, so unfortunately I didn't have a version where this wasn't triangulated, but this follows the exact same process as everything else up until this stage, where it has been, it has had the weighted normals applied. There's no sharp edges on this one, sorry, because there's no seams, and then we just triangulate. So I won't be able to show you that, but it's the same process as everything else, so you should be across that. But anyway, I'll go ahead and I'll show you the benefits of our removal of some sharps. And then we can go into doing some proper normal baking. So this is just a remnant of something else I was doing, which is not relevant to what we're doing right now. And I just need to pull through the helmet normal tangent just so this is all set up to the way you guys should have it. So let's go ahead and just very quickly with text tools, let's just do a normal bake. And so the biggest thing you'll notice here is that while we still have these normal errors over here, it's cleaned up on the back plate here. So if I just get rid of the high poly and render this out, you notice we don't have that horrible sort of black shading artifact in the back there anymore. So yeah, that's really helped sort of fix everything up. We still need to address these areas though. So we're not going to do any more baking with text tools because that's the big sort of problem that I introduced to myself, unfortunately. So what we are going to do is we're going to create a brand new texture. And so I'm just going to call this one normal, oops, can't spell, normal _ bake. You can call it whatever, it's just this makes it easy to know what it is we're working with. And so I'm going to change the width and height to 4096, such as it's set here. And the most important part is making sure you check 32-bit float, and we'll create a new texture bake. And so what I want to do, sorry, just before we do get rid of this helmet normal tangent, I'm just going to show you why we're not going to use text tools, because this is something I completely forgot and I don't know how. But if we look at this completely reflective, there are so many artifacts on our normal map at the moment. And that's because it's not a 32-bit image. It doesn't have enough data to properly represent the normal details that we need. Right? So it's probably not going to be too detrimental given the way that we're going to texture it, but this is just good practice, and I unfortunately screwed that up and wasted hours and hours of my time as a result. So I'm going to make sure you guys don't do the same thing. So let's select the high poly helmet, shift select the low poly, and then if we come to the render tab here, all the way down to bake, we're going to set it to normal, and clearly I've got this from my previous attempt. We're going to have selection to active, and we'll set the extrusion to 0.05 like we had earlier, and 0.1. We can set this to clear image, that's fine, and we'll have the margin set to 4, and I just want to make sure, we need to make sure we have this image texture selected here, and that's actually an old one. I want normal bake, not normal. And then, yeah, so we'll have our high poly selected, shift select our low poly, can't seem to select it, and then we'll go ahead and bake. So it perceptibly looks the exact same, right? But I'll just show you one quick thing here. If we go to shading, and we render this, if we do the metallic and roughness, notice we don't have all those artifacts anymore, so this is infinitely better, and I'm really kicking myself to the fact that I forgot something so rudimentary. Anyhow, so what we want to do is we want to try to address these normal artifacts, right? Because these are horrific. They just look terrible. So what we'll do is we'll just tab into edit mode for our low poly mesh, and I'm just going to L select these two strips here because those are pretty easy. But then for these ones where we've got errors that are a part of larger islands, I'm going to use the C circle selection tool here and just select the areas that are affected. So just all the way up and around there, in here. Do the same for this. So just trying to isolate the faces that are primarily affected by this. Select up and around here as well. Oops, don't need that one. And then we'll do the same at the bottom part. Just all the way up. Cool. And I'm just going to go Shift H just to check that I have selected things properly, because I do have a habit of getting this wrong every now and then. Cool. And so then if I just double tap A to deselect everything, go Alt H to bring in all the inverse selections, we can go Shift H, G, Y, and 1, and we can just move that off of the UV grid, and then go Alt H to bring in the other faces. So what this is going to let us do is it won't bake any data for what's not in the UV space, so we can just rebake these faces with different parameters from everything else, which is a really handy thing to be able to do. So before we do our next bake though, this is very important, do not clear the image because it will clear the image, such as it's saying, and we don't want a margin for these ones, right? Because otherwise we'll have a margin that bleeds back into our original normal bake, and that will just cause more errors than it's solving. And since we're having different parameters, let's go ahead and change the extrusion to 0.005, and the max ray distance to 0.01. So we'll bring the high poly back in, and we'll do a bake, and you'll notice that we'll get some different results on these areas. So that's started to mitigate the effects of the errors, right? Still not perfect, but it's definitely cut them back a bit. So you can still kind of see them drenched away in there. And I have done a lot of testing of this, and I can't, unfortunately, get them to completely go away. It's just a result of the way I taught you to model this way back when. So this is more or less as good as we can get it, because there are some artifacts here still, and you can still just kind of see this one here, unfortunately, but it does do a better job than the original one, so that's the best that we can actually fix this up, unfortunately. So that's just a lesson for me of sort of more forward thinking and keeping the normal baking process in mind for my future tutorial. So I'm sorry that I am teaching you something that is going to have an error involved in it. But with that, let's go ahead and we'll just grab the top. We don't want to re-bake any of these normals again, right? So I'm going to go G, Y, and 1, move them off the grid altogether. Control I to invert that selection, G, Y, and -1. Oops, sorry, Shift H. G, Y, -1. And put all this back onto our UV space. Okay. Cool. So if we look at the actual rendered view with our dielectric material, there's some other normal errors that we need to address. There's just kind of some bleeding around the edges. Doesn't actually look too bad here, surprisingly, but I do know on my first pass I definitely had to go and clean this up. I just don't know why it's not showing through quite as badly this time. But there's also similar errors in here that we need to address, which are just once again to do with the sharp marks. And let's just help clean this up a bit as well. So let's just turn the creases off, let's turn the seams off. So now we can just see the sharps, which I probably should have done earlier, but just didn't think about it. And so I'm just going to select these ones on the inside here, because this is pretty well the exact same error that we were running into earlier. Oops. So just down there, Control E, clear sharp. And then I'm just going to change the max ray. Oh, actually, yeah, no, we'll change it back. So let's go, what was it, 0.05 and 0.1. And we'll just bring the high poly back into play. Select the high poly, select the low poly. Just, yeah, make sure I don't muck around with the margin of the clear image, otherwise you'll sort of be kicking yourself. And if we just look on this area here, because this is the affected area, and do a bake, you'll see that that has helped clean things up. So that's looking much better. Still definitely not perfect, but there's a lot more that we can do here, because you'll sort of notice there's a bit of a shading artifact just sitting around here, right? And that's, I think that's a factor of two things. One, I don't really know why I didn't decide to cut this as a seam in the end. It just kind of seemed a bit stupid that I didn't, but anyway, we'll make it work. So what we'll do is we'll just select the outside edge here, and we'll also select the inside edge, and we're just going to do a very small bevel here just to add a little bit more support to these edges so that the bake comes out just a little bit nicer. So I'm just going to go Control B, and just with one segment, just do that, and then just do some very, very basic cleanup at the bottom here. So I'm just going to select these and merge at last, and then merge this one at last as well. And then very similar process here, so just merge at last. Oops, no, not merge at first, merge at last. Did that merge at last or center? Last. And merge at last. Now, this one's a little bit problematic because we actually do this bevel on a seam, so it kind of screws up our UV a bit here, but it does actually work. I don't know why, but it just does. Is this best practice? Definitely not. I don't actually recommend doing this, but I'm just trying to make things work at the moment. This entire recording process has been a nightmare for me for some reason. And I cannot seem to get this thing to work out correctly for me. So, no, there are going to be some errors here, but I promise we'll have something that looks nice despite some of the finicky things that are going on here. This thing has been killing me all day. So forgive me. And then let's bring the high poly back in, and we'll do the exact same process, so we'll just do another bake. And let's have a look. So now we're getting much, much nicer sort of shading here on the front. I kind of feel like I can still see like that weird shadow, but that might be a result of the bump detail instead. But that has just helped that a little bit. I still can see these errors here. So like we're getting some shading artifacts along the front. Yeah, just around here. I think probably comes a little bit more apparent when we zoom out a bit. And around here a little bit as well. It doesn't seem to be as bad as the first time I recorded this, which is really strange. I don't know why this is playing nicer than it did the first time. But anyway, I'm going to go on the assumption of the fact that something is miraculously changed on my end and I don't understand, and we'll do it the way I did it originally. So we're just going to add a bevel along the front of this as well. So I'm just going to grab these corners, because this edge right here on my first initial bake was terrible. Like, it was so dark and had so many artifacts on it, so I don't know why it's not showing on this instance of the recording, but I'm just going to do what I remember as being best practice on the first attempt and teach you the same thing, just without the mistakes this time. And so once again, I'm going to go Control B. And to avoid this happening, like see how we're getting this horrible clipping, if you just press C, that will clamp the bevel before it clips. And then just as it does clip, just drag in a little bit holding Shift. And then it won't be right on the bounds, because I don't recommend doing that. And then just scroll up on the scroll wheel once. And I'm just going to add a slight bevel to that. Just make the holding edge a little bit more pronounced on the low poly. Sort of matches the high poly a little bit better. And then if you did have any normal errors on there, like as I'm assuming you should, this will just help clean it up. And it's definitely helped clean up some of my baking errors as well. They're not as prevalent anymore, which is nice. And then I do also know that on the inside edge here, once again, it's not showing nearly as bad as it did on my first recording, so I don't know what has changed, because the mesh is the exact same. But we should also do a bevel on this inner edge here. And we can wrap this right around to the back, because I did also notice some problems on the back edge on my first recording. Oops. So we'll just bring this up and around. I'm pretty sure we'll just have it terminate there. Yep. And so I'm just going to go Control B. And this one's annoying, because for whatever reason, this edge just doesn't play nicely. So at least one thing's consistent. So I'm just going to remove the segment. But it does this annoying thing where it slides down and through the rest of the mesh. I got no idea why. But anyway, I'm just going to add this bevel. I'm just going to let that slide down and through. I'm just going to select this vert. And I'm just going to double tap G, just do an edge slide and push it back to where it should be. So just up to here. It doesn't seem to do it on the other side. Well, at least it didn't last recording. It might do it this time. And then I'll just merge these last, like that, just to help clean things up a little bit. And how's it looking on this side? Yeah, so at least something's consistent in the second recording. And we can merge those. And then we can just go ahead and do another bake. So, yeah, this is one thing I like about, well, the more I've learned about normal baking is that I find it's a fairly iterative process. Where, you know, you'll sort of bake it, you'll see what problems you have, what's working, what's not, and then you can go back through and try to address things again. So, in all honesty, it kind of looks like I might need to readdress whatever's going on the inside here, because it just looks wrong compared to the way I had it work before. So I might come back and rebake that area at the end, sorry, because that's even worse than my first recording. So something is different here, and I don't know what it is. But anyway, so that should fix up most of this. So everything should be looking pretty nice. You know, we could go and do some similar things here for the grill on the inside, but it's really going to be occluded by shadow most of the time, so I'm not too concerned by it. So yeah, that's fine. And also, just make sure while we're doing this, because saving the normal map can sort of prove problematic at times with the color space getting corrupted and going wrong and all that. That's also something that happened to me. So just remain cognizant of sort of not closing out Blender or anything of the sort while we're doing this. because we're going to do some more bakes on top of this bake here, and Blender by default does not save or cache normal bakes. But the last time I tried to record it, doing this process, it screwed up the color space amongst a whole lot of other problems, so just try to remain cognizant of that. So my faceplate here, it looks like I've already gone ahead and done a whole lot of work on it, so I'm just going to go ahead and clear any of my sharps and the custom split normals or whatever, because I haven't shown you that yet. Cool, so let's go and redo what I just undid. So let's bring our seams back into play here, so seams. And what we'll do is we'll just go select one seam, Shift G, and we'll go select similar seam, Control E, and mark sharp, just as we have for the helmet. And what we'll do is we'll get, I've already got a weighted normals on here, but yeah, we want to go ahead, get a weighted normals modifier, and we want to use face area, and we want to keep the sharp, so we're getting this sort of effect going on here. So we can Control A to apply that, and then we can go ahead, bring in a triangulation modifier, set the quad method to beauty, and keep normals, so we're getting this sort of result, and we can go ahead and apply that. Now, before we continue, just to save a bit of time here, I did get some normal baking issues along this interior edge here. So what we're going to do is, first and foremost, just going to grab this bottom edge here, so just select up and around. I think one of the biggest problems was for me at this point is that I've got these dents in the normal map here, and I never went ahead and actually like modeled them in. So I might, in my own time, go ahead and model these in, but it's I spent more time today than I wanted to recording this, so I think I'll do that later down the track. I just want to get this tutorial done for you at this stage. So let's just select around those points like so, and I'm just going to go Control B, do a bevel, and this one I will add a singular segment to in the middle. And just being cognizant of what's going down on the left there, I don't want that to start clipping through on itself. So I'm just going to double tap G, just drag this back a bit, because it seems to act a bit weird. Mind you, we probably shouldn't do this after having done the triangulation. And while I'm actually just thinking about it, just while we've got the bevel selected, go Control A and clear the sharp, because we don't want the sharps on the beveled edge here. And I'm just going to do an edge slide to just bring these back. Oops. And then we should be fine to go ahead and select the high poly faceplate, select the low poly faceplate, goodness. And then we can just go ahead. We can put our our margin back on here. We just make sure at all costs, I'm just going to, oh no, I can't collapse that. Just do not press the clear image button, otherwise you'll lose so much progress. But yeah, we'll add the margin back, and we can do a bake. No, we can't. Sorry, this is a mistake I kept on making last time, because we don't have an active material for this to bake to. So we just need to smack this material on, and ignore all these materials, because I've already done the ID baking. That did work. The normal baking is what broke. At least I could keep that part of the tutorial. And so we'll select the low poly, select the high poly, select the low poly, and bake, and then we'll see that pull through. Cool, so now we've got a nice normal bake here, and we can just have a look at that, all nicely shaded. So that's looking lovely. Also, I just realised I've still got, I just need to remove a few things that I've completely forgotten to remove from trying to recover all my work. Just bear with me, sorry. You'd think I don't know what I'm doing sometimes. Alright. Okay, so let's hide the helmet, let's hide the faceplate. Now, for these vents here, I think in the previous tutorial we did duplicate the vents to a high poly version. I'm just going to delete these. We don't need them, because we can just instance from this version. Now, there is one thing actually that I'm just remembering that I won't get to show you. Oh no, I'll get to show you that. But I screwed something up when I applied the array modifier on the tube part here, and that's the fact that if you try to L select yours at the moment, it will select just each individual tube rung, because I forgot to enable the merge value or operator. So all I need you to do is just L select everything but the tubes, Control I, and then just go merge by distance, and that will fix everything up for you. I just completely forgot about that in the previous tutorial. Or maybe did I teach it in the UVing? I can't remember, but just to be on the safe side, we'll do that. Anyway, what we need to do is we need to explode this mesh. So let's select just a singular tube. I'm going to go G, Y, and 5, so just push that back 5 on the y-axis, and then for this little part that it's housed in, G, X, and 5. So we'll just do that. And so we'll just explode the mesh to make things easy for us, to which we can then Shift D and duplicate, and then move this to the high poly, and this can be our vents underscore HP. And I just want to make one change to the mesh here for the high poly version, and that's just adding 2 loop cuts at the top and bottom sides of this, joining them together with J here. I'm just going to turn the subdiv on so you can see what's happening and isolate it. And I'm just going to, isolate it. I'm just going to double tap G and do an edge slide. I just want to harden that edge up in the back there. I know you're never going to see it. It was just annoying me that it was such a rounded curve and it seemed so unnecessary. But anyway, so that's our vents high poly. For the vents low poly, all we need to do is we can apply the mirror modifier. We can get rid of the subdivision surface modifier. And while we're here, we will adjust one simple thing with the UVs, because these are overlapping UVs. I just completely forgot we were going to have these. So I'm just going to select the left-hand side of the UVs, G, X, and 1, and just push these off the UV space just so we don't get overlapping baking data. And then same process, we're just going to select one of the seams, Shift G, seam, Control E, mark a sharp. We'll slap on a weighted normals modifier, keep sharp, apply that with Control A. We'll get a triangulation modifier, triangulate, set this to beauty and keep normals and apply that. Now this is ready for a bake. So let's go ahead, we'll pull, I'll get out of local view. I can also just hide the faceplate because we don't need to be seeing that anymore. So we'll select the high poly vents, which we actually need to apply the mirror and the subdiv. Shift select the low poly, and then we can just go ahead. Just need to double check. Yep, not clear in the image. Bake. Oops, sorry, I've done that again. We need to put the material on. I always forget that. I forgot that every time in the first recording too. It's terrible. So we'll bake that, and then we'll see that pull through over here. So if we just hide the high poly. Actually, what I'm going to do is, just in the overlays, I'm going to not display the UVs on the image. I really don't like that addition in Blender 4.5. I find it really quite irritating, in all honesty. And if we just do a quick preview, we've got some nice normals pulling through there now. So we can just hide that. We can hide the high poly helmet. And then the only other things we need to do is the skull. As I said, sorry, I can't show doing the weighted normals and the triangulation on the skull, but it's the exact same process I've already shown. It's just I won't be able to show you for the skull, sorry. So select the high poly, select the low poly, and we'll just bake this one. No, my goodness, even though I've just said it, still got the material. Let's put that. So reselect, and then we'll bake this. And we'll see that pull through just down in the bottom here. Once again, we can always just do a nice little check to see how that's looking. It's kind of hard to see without it being reflective, but once we texture and put the right materials on, it will look quite nice. And then we just quite simply need to go ahead and do this for the low poly, for the bolts, for the low poly, goodness. So we'll select the screws high poly, shift select the screws low poly, and oh no, sorry, we don't want to bake. Also, these actually seem to have the material on. Sorry, I forgot a step here. I just want to make sure, did I actually remove the sharps from the earlier version? Yep. So we just need to go ahead, select a seam, Shift G, select all the seams, Control E, mark sharp. We'll go to, okay, it's already got a weighted normals modifier, so we can apply that. Get a triangulation modifier, set this to beauty, keep normals, Control A to apply. Make sure we've got the material on, which this one does. And just before I forget, because these also do have mirrored and overlapping UV, so we'll just select the ones on the left here. And it seems like I already moved them off to the side, which I just forgot to show. So we'll just go G, X, and 1, just push these off, and then we can go ahead and do our bake. And then we can pull in our high poly, select the high poly, shift select the low poly, and then we can bake this out, and that will be the final set of textures that we need to bake down to this. Oh, cool. All right. That has taken me hours to get out. So now hopefully I can actually cut to the rest of the tutorial with minimal problem. The only thing I'm going to do here really quickly is I'm just going to see if I can address what's going on the inside part here, because I haven't seen this particular issue arise in any of the attempts and or failed attempts that I've done in recording this. So this one's new. So I'm just going to see if I can find a extrusion and max ray distance here that works to resolve this. And when I do, I'll cut back and I'll just tell you what those values are. Okay, so here we go. So all I've done just in between the cut here is I just moved all of the UVs that were previously here. So I believe these last time were all here. So I've just moved those down -1. And then I just brought exactly these areas, the affected areas, just down back onto the back onto the UV space, just so we could isolate those. And the value that I found to have worked best here, oddly enough, don't ask how or why, I just went through and did a handful of different numbers until something worked. So I did an extrusion of 0.0005 with a max ray distance of 0.005. And it's still definitely not perfect, and we can unfortunately still see that artifact there, but we're not getting the strange other artifacts pulling through or anything. So for the most part, this does look pretty good. Cool. All right, so we've got this normal map, and this normal map's in good working order, so we don't want to lose it. So let's go straight away, image, save as, and we'll just call this normal bake. Don't save it as a PNG, save it as an open EXR. And so we'll do float full. Our codec will be zip, because I believe that's the most lossless codec type for this, and we want this to be completely lossless. Ignore the fact that I've already got these baked. I'm about to show you that. And we'll go save as image. And now we've got our normal map baked out. Let's put the mesh back together. So let's select this, GX -5, to put that back to where it needs to be. The tubes were quite simple, so we'll just select this, GX -5, GX negative, oh no, this will be +5, will it? GX 5, yep. And then the tubes, GY -5. Okay, cool, far out. Let's have a look at this. So that is one nice crisp looking low poly model. And let's crack on to doing the rest of the texture baking to round this out. So let's do the ambient occlusion first, I reckon, because that will be the easiest. Also, I've just noticed this for a while. I don't think these are intersecting properly. I think there's like a slight gap at the top. There is. I'm going to select all of that. I probably don't need the ones in the corners. I'm just going to go GG, slide down, C to extend the slide, and just make sure these are pushed up and into the helmet. Because that has been bugging me for the longest time. Alright, there we go. Now I've actually closed out the mesh. Pretty sure it intersects at the bottom. Okay, cool. My bad. Alright, so let's bake the ambient occlusion. And now that we've done all this, because we've applied all these modifiers, right? So that, I think these have still got, a mirror, but we can just go ahead, apply that. We don't want to apply these two. And keeping with being consistent, we just want to move one of the like visor pieces, I don't know what you'd actually call it, off, so just GX and 1. Hide that, so that's all good, cool. So we can just go Alt-H to unhide everything, and we can just go Control-J to join it together, yep. We probably should technically triangulate these, but there's something I want to do with them later, so let's just leave them as quads for the time being. Okay, cool. So with them all selected, let's go ahead and let's just do a very quick and easy ambient occlusion bake. And before I forget, just depending on the way that the recording's all been stitched together, just make sure any of the UVs that we were trying to correct the normal bakes for, make sure you just move these back down onto our actual UV area. So I'm just going to go GY -1. These ones that we've placed over here, they're fine because they're overlapping, so they'll inherit the data from these ones over here, but we just need to move those back because I did actually record it and screw that up on mine, so just don't screw it up on yours. So we're unfortunately once again going to have to do something a little bit painful here, and that's moving some of the high poly meshes just because we moved them once again. And once again, if you're having any problems moving these, I will supply you with an issue, don't worry. I'm not going to let you get this far into a series and just be like, oh, well, you know, I made a mistake, sorry, you've got to suffer. So I'm just going to put the high poly mesh back together for our ambient occlusion baking. So same process here, just GX -5, deselect everything GX5, and then select both of the tubes, GY5. Oops. LLGY -5? Yeah, my bad. Alright, and I think... No, I don't want to do... No, I don't want to do ambient occlusion on the visors or the eyes or whatever you want to call them. And I do actually have good reason for that. So I'm just going to select all of the high poly mesh and I'm just going to join it all together. So Control J. Cool, and this is going to make the ambient occlusion baking much easier. Cool, so now I've got both of these. What I want to do is we're going to use text tools again. So this is the same as what we did in the Recon helmet texture baking series. So I'm just going to select the high poly, select the low poly. Actually, we're using text tools, so you can just drag select them. And we'll use ambient occlusion here. Now, what I want to do, just before we do anything else, is just turn off the rendering of any other collections. So we don't need this main one. I should have deleted that earlier. We'll get rid of the collection, because I don't even know what's in that. And we'll get rid of the rendering for the backups. So we only want to be rendering the high poly and the low poly, because the ambient occlusion seems to take into account any and every object that's in your scene, so we just want to make sure it's only using these. And now if you remember from the Recon series, we'll get very noisy ambient occlusion bakes if we don't turn off the noise thresholds in our render. Why? I still have no idea, but I know that you need to. Let's just leave the samples at 8 for the time being and see what we get. So let's go ahead and bake. So we've got this. I'm just going to turn off display UVs because I just find it very irritating. Okay, that looks a little bit interesting. Why has this happened? What's going on? I'm trying to go into the UVs of something else. Oh, okay, so that's just the inside of... Yeah, that makes more sense. It's just the way it's projecting. It's all good. So I'm going to bump these samples up to 100 and just bake this out again. It should help take out a fair bit of the noise for us. All right, there we go. So this does look like a fair bit of a mess. In all honesty, but these areas are completely occluded from our view, so it doesn't really matter that they look so strange and distorted. For texturing, this is exactly what we want because this will tell us where to put dirt and grime and build up and all this. As I've said before, if you wanted to do an exploded AO view, so it's like clean on everything, you also can. I'm not really that concerned with doing it. So this is going to work for me. Ambient occlusion, we'll do the same thing. So we're going to save as. We'll do it as a PNG, RGB, 16, 100%. Probably don't need to do 16 for the color depth in all honesty, because it's just black and white. So now we'll just leave it at 8. Call this AO, save as image. All right, so final 2 things we want to do here. So we need to get our material ID mask, so we can define all these colors. And I also want to bake out an emission map for the visor or the eyes or whatever we're calling these. All right, so we can look at our reference image, and so we've got a blue, so that's 1 color. We've got like this steel, so that's 2 colors. We might do a different steel for the front and the back and the detail, so let's go 3. So 2 different types of steel, 3 different types of steel, because we can do a different one for the skull maybe, or maybe we can just share these. So 2 different types of steel, so that's 3 colors. The black parts for the tubing, that rubber, so that's 4. And then we also need a material ID for the white and the red stripes, and that's an extra 2, so that gives us 6 materials as far as I'm concerned. So let's open up the end panel for text tools. And if we go material ID, color ID, so we need 6. And let's just make this something bright. What don't we have? Let's go for like a magenta sort of color. Somewhere around there. Okay, cool. So let's start very quickly defining, actually, the visor or the eyes as well. So we'll go 7. What don't we have? So we've got reds, greens, blues, cyans. Let's go something like orange, like that. I think that should work. Cool. So let's just start going around. We'll just L select these things, and we can just start to apply these materials. So I'll make the skull that magenta color. And then so the surrounding part of the vents also needs to be that same magenta color, like so. And actually I'm just going to remove this material because it's kind of annoying seeing the normal map on everything. I'm just going to L select the helmet and the faceplate. Just want to make sure I'm doing it by normals, not seams, so that it's not interrupting the selection areas. And yep, so I'm just going to assign this to red. So I'm going to just have red be like the primary overall color. So for the tubing, I'm going to go, let's make this yellow. Oops, why did that make... So I want all that to be the magenta color. And then down the bottom here, so for the bottom part here, I might use seams to isolate it because I think it's going to be easier to grab this base section. And kind of brings into question what the underside color should be, because if you get a really harsh cut off with materials, it normally looks a bit weird. But with the way the triangulations worked, it might work in our favor here. So I might actually be able to select around, and it'll be a little bit jagged possibly. So actually, I don't think I want the metal going up onto that edge there. That should be painted. So I think that should work. So let's use that as the magenta color. So we're sort of getting this. I think the indent in there should definitely be the same blue. And we want the same magenta on these panels, the circular parts there. So this is looking alright for the time being. Let's select the back here. Good thing we actually separated the UVs because this makes the selection process very easy. And then similar, I'm going to go through, select all that. So I don't want that steel cropping up onto those back faces there. So just deselect these. And so this is going to be a different steel color. So I'm going to go with the cyan for that. I don't know why that's overwritten those there. It shouldn't have. So we've got that cyan there, and I'm going to use that same cyan for the big side earpiece and the bolts and rivets. So use that there. So it's all looking nice and colourful. And actually, looking at the reference here, I can see that the entire bottom part is this steel sort of colour. So what I'll do is I'll just L select the bottom here, and I'll just assign the cyan to all of this. I know it's going to be a little bit different from the magenta steel that we're putting here, but I think like colour-wise and the fact that it's like a reflective metal and all that, it should work pretty well and blend together. And I've also just noticed for the bolts and the side earpiece here, because we were selecting by seams, it hasn't done the entire object. So we'll just do that cyan again. Cool, so this is looking pretty good. We're just missing one fairly significant aspect of this, and that's the stripes on the helmet here. So what we're going to do to add this in is that I'm going to make a duplicate of the helmet, and this time I do want to make a duplicate of the helmet, trust me. And just for the sake of it, I'm just going to call this helmet underscore ID, okay? So we can hide the LP. And the reason I want to do this is because we're going to cut extra geometry in to define where these stripes should be. So let's go ahead. I'm just going to L select the main portion of the helmet here. and just go Shift and H just to isolate that. And I'm just going to hide the LP just to make this easier. So using Control and 1, so we're going to go to the back view here, and if we go into wireframe view, what we're going to do is we're going to use our knife tool to cut in roughly where these bits of detail should exist, right? So I'm just going to use my knife tool. Actually, I'm going to go into layout just to make this a lot easier to see. And so what we'll do is we'll go K, and so I'm just going to use the knife tool to cut down on the side here. I'm just going to zoom out a bit, just because I did this before and the knife tool was being a bit weird. So I'm going to cut here, and I'm going to press C to make it a straight cut line, and Z to cut through the mesh. So I'm just going to go all the way up, click, and then hit Enter. And so that's placed a cut. It's not perfectly aligned with the reference image, but it's a reference image after all, so that's fine. And I would suggest to try to use the enable symmetry here, but unfortunately doesn't seem to work. I'm not entirely sure why. And so then we can go and do the other side. So just K and C to make it straight, and Z, and then click and enter. And what I'm going to do with these is I'm going to mark these as mean bevel weights. So just increase this factor here, just to make it easier to see where they are to select them later on as well. And so you can see how those have cut through. And then we'll do the exact same thing for the red stripe here. So just using my knife tool again. And then I'm going to cut in just this bottom edge here. So click, K, C, sorry, C, Z, my bad. And do that up. And it doesn't need to be exactly in line. It's not going to be the end of the world if it's not 100% symmetrical. It would be nice, right? But just with the way this is working, I think it will be fine, especially when we, we'll road it away and do whatever with some damage. So we can add that mean bevel weight there as well. Cool. And so it doesn't seem to have cut the whole way through here, and it seems like we've missed some parts. So I'm just going to add those creases in there. And then I'm just going to fix up the end parts here because they don't seem to go the whole way through. So I'm just going to go click there, C, and I'm just going to zoom in a little bit more. Because I just want to get this to go perfectly down to the front. So actually what I might do, just so I don't risk cutting into the back, I might just isolate, oops. Oh yeah, no, I can isolate those faces, so Shift H, go to front view, go vertex, K, find that vertex there, go down, and that one there, go down. And then we can just mark those with mean bevel weights. Cool, so that's worked quite nicely. And then we can very easily isolate these areas. So we can just go vertex select mode. Actually, we go edge select mode, sorry, my bad. Shift G, so we'll select similar by bevel. Where's it gone? Bevel. So that will select everything. If we go to vertex select mode, we can just go H to hide. Now, if we try to L select, and if we do it by normal, it will actually select everything. Which seems a bit weird, but that's actually what makes sense at the moment. We just need to sort of disconnect it from the back portion here. So I'm just going to use L select back on our seams. So I'm just going to hide these back portions just here. So hide that. And now if we try to L select with the normal, it seems like this is still connected to something. So I clearly missed something there. What have I missed? This is going back. Just this edge right down here. So if I can just hide these two verts, just like that, now I'll be able to L select. Oops, be able to L select all of these. And then I can go Alt and H to unhide everything. And then if I just use face select mode, I think it will make it a little bit easier. We can just use Shift and L to deselect portions. That's deselected everything because it's done it by normal, but if we do it by seam, that'll deselect the back portion, Shift L, and then we can just do this bit by bit. And so we've almost isolated that area. I think we just need to do a little bit of manual selection here just to get these faces on the inside, and also these ones just on that bevel that we added for the sake of shading. Oops, and just select down there. And then I just want to make sure that we haven't missed any faces or anything of the sorts, which it doesn't look like we have. Cool. So what we can do, let's just go back to our UV editing. So we haven't used the dark blue, so let's assign a color there, like so. So We go Shift H, that's a dark blue color now, and it makes it pretty easy to select the centermost part. So if I just do a click and drag, I can just select between there, and I've kind of accidentally gone outside of that bound, so I'm just going to use my circle selection tool here to limit that. Let's get rid of those ones. I think on the left hand side it's pretty alright. Let's clean those ones up. Oops, don't want to add that, my bad. Get rid of those, and get rid of that one there. Whoops, went too far into the back. I'll just deselect it manually. And same on this part here, just deselect those. And if we look at the top-down view, or just even isolate everything, it will make it a bit easier to see. So we've got one extra face there that we don't want. And I can see some more at the back there, so I'm just going to use B to select those, hide those. And I think that looks pretty good. Cool. And so we can assign a green color ID mask to that. And it does make it a little bit easier to see if we've got anything missing. So we can just add dark blue there. And just check on the back really quick. Make sure there's nothing out of line on the top. Cool. All right. So now we've got a nice material ID set up. And so if we go into edit mode here, we can go ahead and bake. I forgot to adjust these. I did go back and record this to fix this for the ambient occlusion, but I haven't updated it here, my bad. And then using text tools, so we won't use the material ID. If I remember correctly, it's the base color that we use. No, it must be the diffuse then. Cool, and that bakes out a nice diffuse map for us, which we can just go ahead, well, sorry, not a diffuse map, a material ID, so we can just call this our ID mask. PNG, I'll use 16 and 100% compression because this is actually color-based this time. And that will let us get our ID mask. Oh, actually, I noticed one thing. The little grill in here, I'm pretty sure it's supposed to be like a silver or something of the sort, so I'm just going to set that to be that magenta color there. And sorry, just while I'm thinking of it, I just wanted to make a quick adjustment to the colors in the vents here. So I'm just going to L select the bottom and just make sure it's set to seam here. So I'm just going to grab all of these at the base here. And it probably doesn't make a whole lot of sense realistically, but I'm just going to set these bottom faces to be the same as this black rubber over here. And the main reason I want to do that is because we're also going to adjust some more materials around it. But just like, it'll provide more of an illusion of depth if any light gets caught in there, and it'll sort of just look like it fades out because the black won't reflect as much light. And then I'm just going to L select the UVs just outside of that. So I'm just going to select those, Shift H. And pretty much I want this inner part here, like all around, to have the same magenta ID mask, so that steel color. So I'm just going to control select all of these verts around the top of the seam here. And you're probably thinking, why don't I just use, Shift G, select similar by seam? And I could, but would also select that seam at the bottom there. But I can also then expand this selection, which I'll show you how to do in a second. So this actually works quite well, even though it's a little bit more manual. So just select around the top. I think I'm missing a vert there. And unfortunately, because this is triangulated, we also can't just alt select the loop because Blender doesn't see it as a loop due to the triangulation. But anyway, once I select these, I'm just going to go Control Plus. I'm going to go to Face Select mode, oops, and then just hide these. A to select everything, and I'm just going to assign the magenta color there. And then you can see we're sort of getting a different set of colors in there, which I think just looks a little bit nicer. And I think on my end, I just need to clean a few things up. I know I probably already fixed these in an earlier part of the recording, but I've had to do this in a very segmented recording, so I've sort of made some different mistakes while I've been doing it. And another one I know I've done is if I just hide the tube here, I've got the blue material on the inside here, so I'm just going to go L select to normal. Select both of these and assign that magenta color. And I think, actually, what I'm going to do as well, because I've had a bit of a change of heart with the bottom here, I'm just going to go material. I'm going to set this to be in the magenta color. Oops, I don't want to do that for the back. By seam. I'm just going to do that as the magenta color there. I don't think it's going to make a world of difference, but I just decided to change it. And so I'll bake that out. And we'll get the update there. Image, save as, and we'll go ID, RGB 1600%, save as image. Cool, so we don't actually need to keep that, and we don't need this full of materials either. Now the last thing I want to do, and then I'll leave you alone, because I know this has been a massive tutorial, we just want to make an emission map for the visor, or whatever we're calling this. I don't know what the proper terminology is. And what we want to do is we kind of want to have a mask around the edge. So like we want it to glow more in the center here, right? And be a little bit darker on the outside. And a way I've found to do this is quite simple, in all honesty. So what we can do is if we just go Control R, we can just cut a loop in through the middle here. And with this loop, we can just select it. And we only really need to do it for one because it will bake. We just need to make sure, sorry, that the one that we're doing this on is the one that's actually in the UV sheet. So on my instance, it's the one on the right. We don't need to bother about doing it for the one on the left. So cut this through the middle. And the reason we want to do this is because if we go to our object data, we can go to attributes. And we've got a whole lot of attributes from when we're actually modeling this thing. So I'm just going to leave them, just save causing any issues. But anyway, let's go add an attribute. Let's just call this one glow. And we'll set the domain to vertex. We can add. This won't do anything at the moment, but if we go ahead and search for set attribute and add this to a factor of 1, or you can always find the set attribute under your mesh, and it is somewhere here, set attribute. So you won't be able to see anything at the moment, but we can visualize this with a material. I'm just going to isolate this. So if I just add a new material here, I'm just going to get rid of the principled. Let's get an emission shader, plug that in, and let's have a look. So still not doing anything, but if we bring in an attribute node and we change the name to glow and plug the color into the color here, you'll notice we're getting exactly that effect of, you know, dark on the outside and brighter on the inside. At the moment, it's pretty poor in the way it looks. But we can adjust that, and it seems like we've missed out setting the attribute on this part here. No? That's strange. Maybe I just need to go J. Okay, let's just do that at either end just to make sure it's consistent. So what we can do to make this effect look a little bit better, because it's a bit jagged and a bit all over the shot at the moment, is in our modifiers, we can just add a subdivision surface modifier. We can crank this up to 4. And it looks like it might have some custom split normal data, which we don't want. And then it's kind of rounded everything out, which we don't want. So what we can do is we can just alt select the outside and the inside loops, Shift E and 1. And this is one of the very rare instances where I'll tell you to use a value of 1 for any sub-D modeling. Sorry, I just completely stumbled on what I was saying. And I just want to see, do we have attributes on the outside here? No, we definitely don't. But yeah, so now it gives you a nice convincing sort of gradient on the outside. And so what we can do is we can just bake this down to an emission texture. So we'll just go to UV editing, and we can just choose an emission. Where's it gone? Emission. And we just go bake. And now we've got that baked down as an emission texture. Obviously, we could just leave it like this because, you know, this is in Blender, but if you wanted to take it to a different software or program, then we'd need to define an emission mask. And so we can just go image, save as, and we can just call this emission. And we'll just bump the compression up like that. So, yeah, there we go. Whew, sorry, I know that was a massive bloody tutorial and we covered a lot, but as I said, this is actually, contrary to what I was expecting, a bit more of a complicated asset. And so apologies for all the cuts and all the strange oddities. Just honestly, the recording process for this one killed me because there was so many things to keep track of. So I hope I've edited it in such a way that makes sense and it's coherent. Yeah, I'm really sorry, but this was a lot to keep track of, and I've never done anything at this scale before. This is huge for me. So I hope it all works. Please, if you've got any questions, feel free to ask. With the blend files and all that, I'll happily provide those if you struggle with the moving out of edit mode, because that was, once again, just many of the follies that I had for this recording. But I hope you're happy with what you've got. It's not easy to get here. This is a very, very complicated asset, despite how simple it looks. And I'll see you all in the next tutorial, where we'll take all this over to Quixel Mixer. Well, actually, we'll start by exporting and then take it to Quixel. And yeah, we'll really put the finishing touches to this helmet. So I'll see you all there.